She returned to pick up her car. The papers were signed. Everything should have been settled. Until she asked a simple question. Why wasn't this fee on the contract yesterday? The salesman's smile vanished. His voice dropped, sharp and cold. You already signed, so shut up and take the car. What he didn't know was that someone was watching. Someone he should have never lied to. A contract, a login at 9:30 p.m., and a truth no one in that dealership saw coming. How about you? Have you ever felt disrespected just because you didn't know the system? Comment 1 if you stayed silent and let it slide. Comment 2 if you spoke up and stood your ground. Jackson Reeves didn't arrive at the dealership like the man who owned it. There was no security escort, no freshly detailed Mercedes, no shine on his sneakers. He parked a black 2010 Honda Civic 2 blocks away and walked, his pace slow and even. The Tennessee air was cool that morning, with a faint mist rolling off the street, just enough to blur the signage until he was close enough to read it. Reeves Auto Group. Bold white letters across the glass. His name, his legacy. And right now, something felt wrong. He didn't walk through the front doors like an executive. He slipped in through the side, where the service entrance met the breakroom hallway, a place most customers never saw. A place where the honest work used to start early, not get dodged. The bell above the service bay door gave a polite ding. No one looked up. Jackson scanned the floor. The reception desk was empty, the sales pit scattered. One guy chatted near the water cooler. 2 desks were unmanned. It was barely 9:45 a.m. This was supposed to be one of his cleanest operations. Charlotte, Tennessee. A mid-range volume, high trust market. Or at least, it used to be. He didn't want to make assumptions. Not yet. The reason he'd come here unannounced, in disguise, without even telling his regional VP, was because of a string of whispers, quiet complaints, odd discrepancies. Nothing big enough to raise alarms individually, but just enough to raise his instincts. A customer in Knoxville said their warranty was padded. Someone in Franklin said the numbers didn't match what they signed. Jackson didn't come to investigate one bad deal. He came to see if the tone had changed. He walked past a row of lightly used Camrys, the kind this branch moved fast. That's when he saw her, a young woman in a faded blue hoodie, holding a manila folder against her chest, a car seat on the ground beside her. Her baby, AB 6 months old, slept peacefully wrapped in a yellow blanket. She wasn't talking to anyone just yet. She was waiting alone beside a closed glass door marked finance and deliveries. Something about her looked familiar. He stepped closer, carefully, quietly. Then he saw it. The profile, the calm but tense posture, the eyes that didn't dart but calculated. Her name clicked into his memory like a key. Rachel Monroe. She used to work for him. Not here, not in Charlotte, but 2 states over, an accounting assistant at the Memphis regional office. She was sharp, precise, quiet, but principled. She'd once raised concerns about invoice discrepancies tied to a fleet sale, and somehow, despite being right, she disappeared a month later. No HR complaint, no formal exit, just gone. And now here she was, not an employee but a customer, standing with a folder that looked far too full for a standard car delivery. Jackson ducked behind a row of banners near the customer lounge. He didn't want her to see him. Not like this. Not yet. She didn't know he was here, and the salesman approaching her slick suit, quick smile, clipboard in hand, had no idea who she used to be. Jackson tilted his head just enough to hear the opening line. "Miss Monroe, great to see you again," the man said, his voice as smooth as butter. "Left out overnight. We've got your paperwork just about wrapped up. Just one more little thing to go over." Rachel followed the salesman Chad Morrison, according to the nameplate on his lapel, through the narrow hallway and into a smaller, glass-walled office. He moved like a man who thought he was in control, clipboard in hand, shirt freshly pressed, hair sculpted, not cut. Jackson stayed outside, half shielded by a rotating display of roadside assistance brochures. From there, he had a clear view of everything except Rachel's eyes, which remained locked on the folder in her hands. Chad tapped a few keys on his tablet and pulled a printout from the laser printer. He sat across from Rachel, laid the paper flat in front of her like a menu, and began to talk fast. All right, so this version just includes a few of the delivery items we bundle in post-signing. Totally normal stuff. I'll walk you through it. Rachel's fingers tightened on her folder. Wait, she said softly. This wasn't on the sheet I signed yesterday. Chad's voice didn't miss a beat. Yeah, so corporate updated the delivery process last quarter. New compliance stuff. It happens all the time. Same price, just broken out a little differently. He leaned forward, smiling. You're still getting the same car, same deal. We're just finishing up the paperwork trail. Jackson's stomach tightened. He had helped rewrite that paperwork trail 2 years ago, specifically to eliminate manipulative add-ons. Any FEs added after signing had to be logged through a secondary approval system with the timestamp, reason code, and full client sign-off. That's how they protected buyers. So why did the new line items include $495 full electronics protection plan, $275 interior sterilization fee, $395 VIN etching and theft recovery system? That last one made Jackson freeze. VIN etching had been discontinued chain-wide. He'd killed it himself after a regional audit found reps in Arkansas charging for it without ever actually etching the VINs. He stared at the paper in Chad's hand. The format looked off, the fonts mismatched, the headers didn't follow the corporate template, but it looked convincing enough to pass under pressure. Rachel was quiet, rereading the list. Why is the electronics plan listed as required? She asked carefully. Chad gave her the same plastic grin. It's not required, technically, but it's bundled into the financing offer. We include it to lock in the lower rate for you. Helps with credit scoring optimization. That was complete fiction, and Jackson knew Rachel could tell. Her eyes flicked toward the exit. The baby at her feet let out a tiny, fussing sound, but she stayed seated. She didn't challenge him directly. Not yet. Chad kept going. I know. It's a lot of paperwork. Trust me, go through this every day. Most people just want the keys by this point. Rachel blinked slowly. Do I have to sign again? Just one more acknowledgement, Chad said, pulling a pen from his pocket. It's standard. You already agreed to the terms. This just covers the final prep. Jackson wanted to step in. Every instinct screamed at him to, but not yet. He needed to see how far this would go. He circled behind the customer lounge to the corner of the finance divider, just in time to hear Chad lower his voice. I know this can feel overwhelming, but listen, here to help you. This deal, it's solid. Don't let little details get in your head. You already signed once. You're basically gold. Rachel sat still for a second longer, then quietly asked, Can I take this home to review before I sign again? That was the moment. Chad didn't flinch, but his tone changed. He tapped the page, his voice firm now. The car is being detailed as we speak. We've already got the certificate of delivery queued up. If you leave now, we'll have to rerun your file from scratch. Jackson watched her face, saw the flicker of uncertainty, and then, barely audible, he heard Chad say it, You already signed. So shut up and take the car. Jackson didn't move. Not at first. He stood just beyond the doorway, hand resting lightly on a brochure stand, watching the scene unfold in the reflection on the glass. The words still echoed, You already signed. So shut up and take the car. The room hadn't gone silent. It had tightened, like a string pulled taut across a fault line. Rachel didn't flinch. Her posture remained still, but her grip on the folder shifted firmer now, not out of fear, but control. Chad tapped the paper again, the pen in his hand, an extended afterthought. It's all in there, he said, his tone bouncing back to professional smoothness. We just itemize differently now. It's corporate policy. Jackson knew that wasn't true. And worse, Chad knew it wasn't true. He wasn't confused or improvising. He was selling a lie with the confidence that came from practice. Rachel tilted her head, scanning the document again. And the VIN etching, she asked. I don't remember that being on the original quote. Chad nodded like it was a minor detail. Every vehicle goes through the same pre-delivery protocol. We etch the VINs for theft deterrence. It's already been done. Another lie. VIN etching was cut from all dealership procedures in 2021. There was no protocol. No one had etched anything. It was a ghost fee, a phantom charge existing only on paper. Jackson stepped back, walked the long way around the sales floor. He needed air, but more than that, he needed clarity. He stopped at the edge of the sales pit, scanning the room. The receptionist was back, but scrolling on her phone. Two other salespeople were talking by the vending machine. A man in khakis walked past, holding coffee, and didn't make eye contact. It wasn't just Chad. It was the whole tone of the place, detached, disengaged, unwatched. From behind a black RAV4, he had a clear line of sight back to the finance room. Chad was still talking. Rachel was listening, but her expression had hardened with restraint. Jackson could read her now. She was doing math in her head, running totals, budget margins, deciding how much she could afford to lose just to avoid starting over. He'd seen that look before, on single moms, night shift workers, and first-time buyers with nothing to fall back on. The look of someone who couldn't afford to be knocked down again. And that's when it clicked. Chad wasn't just taking money. He was counting on her silence. He was betting she wouldn't push back, because people like her rarely did. Jackson clenched his jaw, not in anger, but in certainty. He had seen enough. He took one step toward the glass office, then another, slow, steady, without a word. Inside, Chad circled a final line with his pen. Let's go ahead and finalize this. But the door never closed. Jackson walked in before Rachel could answer, calm but deliberate. His voice was even, but every word landed like a dropped weight. That delivery fee? That's not part of the agreement. Chad blinked. Rachel looked up, startled. Chad tried to recover. Excuse me. Jackson didn't flinch. The VIN etching, the electronics protection, that's not in the approved package. Show me where it says it is. Chad hesitated, his eyes flicking from the computer to the hallway, then back to Jackson. Look, I don't know who you are, but you will, Jackson said. Now explain this. In front of her, Chad stood a little taller, as if posture alone could reassert control. Sir, sure what you think this is, he said, attempting a laugh. But I've been here for years. I know the packages inside and out. Jackson ignored the performance, pointing at the page. Then show me. Show her. Right here. Where does it say this dealership is authorized to charge for VIN etching? Chad shifted. It's in the system. Finance will break it down. No, Jackson said flatly. You break it down, right now. In front of her, Rachel slowly stood up, lifting the carrier handle. Her expression hadn't changed, but her silence had. It became a presence. Chad's face flushed. I don't have to do this. I don't even know who you. He stopped mid-sentence. Just behind Jackson, in the open hallway, a man had stepped into view. Dark blazer, pressed slacks, a dealership lanyard around his neck. His name was Tom Whitaker, the general manager. And the second he saw who was standing in that office, he froze. Mr. Reeves, he said, his voice quiet, almost breathless. Chad turned sharply, his eyes wide. Wait, what? But Jackson didn't turn. He didn't smile or offer a handshake. He looked at Rachel instead. I'm sorry, he said gently. This isn't how we treat people. Not here, not under my name. Her brows furrowed slightly, still processing what had just happened. But Jackson was already moving. He turned to Tom. I need a conference room, he said. Now. Tom, pale and swaying, nodded quickly and motioned down the hall. Chad didn't say another word, just stood there, arms limp, clipboard hanging at his side. Jackson looked back at Rachel, his voice softening. Please, come with me. I want to make this right. She hesitated, then nodded slowly. Her steps were cautious but deliberate, the baby now stirring faintly in its carrier. As they crossed the main sales floor, the air changed. Phones stopped ringing. Conversations paused. Heads turned, but no one dared to speak. Chad lingered by the glass wall, stunned, unsure whether to chase the moment or vanish from it. Jackson didn't look back. Trevor, the lot attendant, stood near a side window and caught his eye. The kid didn't say anything, but Jackson saw the flicker of recognition. He gave a subtle nod in return. Inside the conference room, Jackson pulled out a chair for Rachel. Tom entered next, closing the door. Chad followed slower, trying to hide how much he was sweating. He leaned against the wall, crossing his arms, failing to look relaxed. Jackson reached across the table and picked up the clipboard. "This is the quote you gave her?" he asked without looking up. Chad shifted. "Yeah." Jackson scanned the numbers, then circled 3 different FEs. "Explain these," he said. Chad straightened. "Look, I don't know why I'm being grilled here. Everyone includes these. It's standard. Do you have documentation that shows these FEs are approved?" Jackson asked. Chad hesitated. "They're in the system." "No, they're not," Jackson said, firmer now. "I helped rewrite that system. VIN etching was discontinued in 2021. Powertrain coverage is limited to 5 years. Not full electronics protection. You tacked over $2,000 in junk onto a deal that was already closed. And you did it because you thought no one would notice." Rachel said nothing, but her hands trembled slightly on the carrier strap. She stared at the paper, unblinking. "You told her the payment would be $349, Jackson continued. "But that's only possible if she puts $2,000 down. And even then, the rate you quoted is inflated by 2.5 points. That's not a mistake. That's a con." Chad pushed off the wall. "I hit my numbers. Customers leave happy. I know how to sell." "Oh," Jackson said, leaning forward. "You know how to pressure." "There's a difference," Tom finally spoke. "Jackson, I mean, Mr. Reeves, I didn't know he was doing all this. I swear. We've been busy, but the numbers look solid." "I figured, that's the problem," Jackson cut in. "You looked at the numbers. I looked at the people." Rachel stood slowly. Her face was flushed, not with embarrassment, but with a quiet, rising fury. "I thought this was a good place," she said, not to anyone in particular, but just out loud. "I really thought it was different." Jackson turned to her. "It was supposed to be," he said. "And I'm sorry it wasn't." He pulled a card from his back pocket and slid it across the table. "This is my direct line. I'm going to personally make sure you get a fair deal. If you still want the car, you'll get it at the right price, without the garbage." She looked at the card, then took it, careful as if it might vanish. "Thank you," she said. "And we'll have someone else handle the paperwork," Jackson added. "Someone who doesn't invent numbers." Chad's arms dropped to his sides. "Are you serious?" "Clean out your desk," Jackson said, standing. "You're done here." "Come on, I know negotiation," Jackson snapped. "You knew better. You just didn't care." Chad didn't argue again. He stormed out, muttering something no one acknowledged. Jackson turned back to Tom. "We're not done talking either," he said. "I'll see you in your office in 10. Then he walked Rachel back out toward the lobby. Heads turned as they passed. Conversations fell quiet again. The front desk receptionist sat rigid in her seat, hands frozen above the keyboard. Jackson stopped in front of her. "Did you greet her when she walked in?" The receptionist blinked. I don't remember." Jackson nodded slowly. Start remembering, or start looking. But he knew better. Firing one man wouldn't fix what was broken. This wasn't about Chad anymore. This was about culture, about tone, about the tiny decisions that shape how people behave when they think no one important is watching. Jackson sat alone in Tom's office, the blinds open. He could see the full showroom floor. The noise outside had returned: phone rings, soft footsteps, the low hum of computers, but the room still felt quieter, as if everyone was waiting. The door opened. Tom walked in, his steps slower, measured. He looked smaller, like someone who realized how long he'd been asleep at the wheel. "I didn't know," he said quietly. "I swear to you, Jackson, I didn't know Chad was doing that." Jackson didn't reply right away. He stared at the floor, then at the window. "But you knew something," he said finally. "You knew complaints were going up. You knew the deals were getting more aggressive. You knew customer satisfaction dropped last quarter, and you blamed the survey system." Tom didn't answer. Jackson leaned forward. "What happened to what we built here?" Tom shook his head. "I thought we were doing okay. Numbers were strong. Turnover was low. I figured maybe the industry just changed." Jackson's eyes stayed locked on his. "The industry didn't change. We did. We stopped listening. We stopped paying attention. We stopped treating people like people." Tom exhaled slowly. "So, what now?" Jackson stood, calm and clear. "Now, "We clean house," he said. "And not just by firing one guy. I want every deal from the last 90 days reviewed. Every single one. Refund anything that wasn't clearly explained. And I want one-on-ones with every salesperson. I want to know how they were trained, what they were told to prioritize, and who else thinks it's okay to sell lies with a smile." Tom nodded slowly. "And one more thing," Jackson added, reaching for the doorknob. "I want Trevor in my office next week." Tom blinked. "The lot kid?" "Yeah," Jackson said. "He's one of the only ones who looked a customer in the eye today. That matters." 3 days later, Jackson returned. No hoodie, no sneakers, no disguise. He walked through the front doors of Reeves Auto Group in a tailored navy suit and clean leather shoes. Not because he wanted attention, but because he demanded accountability. Every employee had been notified. The dealership was open, but no sales would happen until after 11. Jackson had called for an all-hands meeting. They packed into the break room. Trevor stood near the back, arms crossed, listening. Tom Whitaker sat near the front, his notebook open but untouched. Jackson didn't use a microphone. He just stood at the front of the room and began to speak. "I started this company in 2004, he said. "Not with investors, but a used car lot behind a barbecue joint in Murfreesboro. I sold 3 cars that first week and washed every one of them myself." A few people chuckled quietly. Jackson's voice didn't waver. "Back then, I didn't know if I'd make it, but I had 2 things. My name and my word. I never promised what I couldn't deliver. I never looked someone in the eye and lied to close a deal." The room fell still. "Somewhere along the way," he continued, "we forgot that. Not all of us, but enough. We started letting small things slide. We let pressure outrank patience. We saw customers as sales goals instead of human beings." He looked around the room, slow and deliberate. "If you've ever added a fee just because you thought no one would notice. If you've ever rushed a woman out the door because she didn't look like she could pay. If you've ever talked down to someone who asked too many questions. Today is your wake-up call." A voice from the side spoke. "What if some of us were doing things right, but no one ever noticed?" It was Trevor, nervous but steady. Jackson turned. "Yeah." Trevor nodded once. "Then we start noticing," Jackson said. He walked over to Trevor and handed him a small envelope. Inside was a letter, a promotion from lot attendant to junior sales associate, with full training and benefits. Trevor blinked. "Are you serious?" "I'm dead serious," Jackson said, "because the people who treat others with respect, those are the ones I want representing my name." The room didn't cheer, but the silence was enough. After the meeting, things moved quickly. Chad's recent deals were pulled. 5 required refunds. Rachel's case was used in a new training seminar. Every manager was enrolled in a 3-week ethics workshop. And Jackson brought back someone few expected. Helen Briggs, a no-nonsense former manager who had left 2 years earlier, saying the place didn't feel the same anymore. She returned as the new head of customer relations. Her first move was installing a glass partition between the sales floor and the finance offices, so nothing could be whispered behind closed doors. That Friday, Jackson stood near the certified pre-owned sedans, just watching. The energy felt different, quieter, more careful. Not out of fear, but awareness. He saw a young salesman kneeling beside an older customer, calmly explaining the trim levels without rushing. That wasn't something a spreadsheet could measure, but Jackson knew it mattered more than any monthly target. Helen stepped beside him. "Looks like they remember who they work for," she said. Jackson nodded. "They better," he replied, "because I'm not going anywhere." There was still one piece left to complete the reminder of why this all mattered. That Sunday morning, Jackson sat on the porch of his mother's old house in Jackson, Tennessee. A mug of black coffee sat cooling on the worn wooden railing. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a faded photo. In it, a 10-year-old him stood beside his mother in front of an old, rust-colored Cutlass Supreme. Her smile was wide, proud not because the car was new, but because it was hers. He remembered that day, how she had saved for months, how she walked into that dealership with the nurse's paycheck and no co-signer, and how the salesman had taken his time, explaining every document, never making her feel small. That moment had shaped him. The following week, a new plaque was installed above the dealership's main entrance. Etched in brushed steel, it read, "We treat every customer like they're buying their very first car with dignity, patience, and truth." Rachel came back a month later for her first service appointment. Trevor was behind the service desk. She smiled when she saw him. "You remember me?" she asked. He smiled back. "Of course, I do. We got you in that silver Corolla, right?" "She's running great," she said. They chatted for a few minutes, natural, easy. From his office, Jackson watched, quiet and unseen. He didn't step out, because this moment wasn't about him. The point wasn't the speech or the refund. The point was this: you don't build a good business on volume or upsells. You build it on trust, on how you treat people when you think no one is watching. He'd learned that from his mother, and he'd reminded others of it through Rachel, through Trevor, and through every customer they would greet from now on. He wasn't looking for headlines or stories about corporate reinvention. He just wanted to walk the floor of his own company without wondering who was smiling to his face while bending the truth behind his back. He wanted to know that when a woman asked, "Why wasn't this on the contract yesterday?" the answer she got would be real. That's the thing about rot. It doesn't announce itself. It spreads when no one's looking. And he had found it because a woman who used to help keep the books walked in, not as an insider, but as a customer. The system had treated her like she didn't matter, but she did. She still knew how the numbers were supposed to add up. And when they didn't, she just needed someone to listen. People think leadership is loud, but most of the time, it's quiet. It's the decision to show up, to ask again when everyone else has stopped listening, to say, "We can do better," even when no one is clapping. That's what a company's soul really is. It's how you treat someone who doesn't seem important. It's what you protect when you think no one will ever find out. You don't rebuild trust with apologies. You rebuild it with proof. One decision, one person, one honest moment at a time. He looked up from his desk and saw Trevor walking a customer through a lease agreement, slowly and carefully. He saw Rachel in the waiting room, her daughter asleep in the same carrier. He saw Helen by the window, watching the floor like she'd never left. The company would never go back to what it was. And that was the point. Because not every fall needs to be a failure. Sometimes, the lowest point becomes the clearest. Sometimes, it's the only place you can rebuild something real. If this story moved you, or reminded you of something that still lives in your memory, let us know in the comments. And if you believe more people need to hear stories like this, hit subscribe. We've got more coming, stories that speak to the heart, not just the headline.